I'd smile for my kids, laugh politely when old friends visited, but inside, I felt like I was fading away. But something changed. And now, at 75, I can honestly say I've found happiness again. Not the same happiness I had when I was young, something deeper, steadier, and more meaningful. And if you're over 60, 70, or even 80, I want to tell you, it's not too late. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because I always have my coffee by the kitchen window on Tuesdays before checking the mail. The view never changes, the same trees, the same road, the same neighbor's dog that barks at absolutely nothing. But that morning, the sameness hit me differently. I suddenly felt like I was, on pause. Like my life was a movie that had stopped playing, but the clock was still ticking. I'd lost Margaret, my wife of 45 years, 2 years earlier. And though the grief had dulled, the emptiness hadn't. Friends called sometimes, but our conversations were about aches, medication schedules, or the weather. My children visited when they could, but they had jobs, kids, and busy lives of their own. I didn't want to burden them with my loneliness. That morning, I walked to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and said out loud, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life like this?" The answer was simple, no. But I had no idea what yes looked like anymore. I didn't start with a grand plan. I started small, almost embarrassingly small. I told myself, go outside every single day. Not for errands. Not for yard work. Just to be outside. The first few days, I simply sat on a park bench. At first, I felt awkward, like I was just killing time. But something began to shift. When I smiled at strangers, a few smiled back. When I said hello, sometimes people answered. One afternoon, a man about my age sat beside me. His name was George. He wore a cap with a fishing logo and carried a walking stick. We talked for 5 minutes about the weather, then about fishing, then about how neither of us had been fishing in years. It was such a simple conversation, but I went home feeling lighter. Practical tip number 1. Pick one small, non-negotiable daily habit that puts you in the path of life. Sit in a park. Visit a cafe. Browse your library. The key is to be around people, even if you don't talk much at first. Going outside helped me feel less invisible, but there was still a heavy shadow over me, the weight of unspoken grief. Margaret and I had a marriage full of laughter, arguments, quiet evenings, and shared dreams. When she died, I didn't just lose her, I lost our future. The trips we planned, the new recipes we were going to try, the silly inside jokes that would never be told again. For a long time, I avoided talking about her. If I spoke her name, the sadness came flooding back. So, I bottled it up. Then, my daughter suggested a grief support group. I resisted. "I'm fine," I said. But I wasn't. Finally, I went. Sitting in that circle, I listened as strangers spoke about losses that mirrored my own. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to hide my tears. No one rushed me to move on. When I spoke about Margaret, I expected the familiar ache. But something unexpected happened. It felt like setting down a heavy bag I'd been carrying for too long. Practical tip number 2. Grief doesn't shrink unless you give it air. Talk to someone, a friend, a counselor, a support group. The act of speaking your pain out loud makes it lighter. With a little more light in my life, I began to wonder, what now? I asked myself, what makes you feel alive? The answer came to me quietly, painting. Years ago, I used to paint landscapes. Margaret would tease me about how many shades of green the first owned. I hadn't touched a brush in years. But one day, I dug out my old paints from the garage. I set up a small table by the window and started. My hand was shaky, my lines uneven, and my colors a bit muddy. But when I stepped back, I saw something more important than perfection, joy. It wasn't just the painting, it was the feeling of creating something, of contributing something to the world. That's when I signed up to teach a small art class at the community center. My students ranged from beginners in their 60s to an 85-year-old woman who painted like she was still 25. We laughed, shared stories, and celebrated each other's progress. For the first time in years, I felt useful again. Practical tip number 3. Purpose isn't about a paycheck, it's about contribution. Find one thing you can do that makes someone else's day better, whether it's volunteering, mentoring, or sharing a skill. I learned something important: happiness isn't a sudden event. It's built like a wall, one brick at a time. I started keeping a gratitude notebook. Every night before bed, I wrote down 3 things I was thankful for. The smell of coffee in the morning. A call from my grandson. The sound of rain on the roof. I also made myself move every day. Not marathons, just walks, stretches, or dancing in the living room when my favorite songs played. And perhaps the most transformative rule I made: say yes more often. Yes to lunch with an old friend. Yes to trying a new food. Yes to joining a community event, even if I felt nervous. Practical tip number 4. Create your happiness routine. Gratitude, 3 things nightly. Movement, 15 minutes a day. Yes, accept at least one new invitation a week. Today, my days are full. I still miss Margaret, I always will, but my life is no longer defined by loss. I wake up curious about what the day will bring. I have art classes to teach, friends to meet, and walks to take. I've learned to savor small joys and chase new experiences. I'm not the man I was before my loss. I'm someone stronger, someone who knows that even after the darkest seasons, joy can grow again. If you're watching this and you feel like your story is over, it isn't. Not yet. If my story gave you even a little hope, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments. What's one thing you're going to say yes to this week? Life doesn't end when we get older. In fact, sometimes, it begins again.